Good morning, everyone. Happy Guest Thursday.
Good morning.
Welcome to Daily Dose. We have a really, I think, special guest on today because surprisingly, it's kind of our first time meeting, despite the fact that we are first cousins. Please join us in welcoming my first cousin, Katie Bowman, to Daily Dose.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello. Hello. So nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you too. It's remarkable. So my actually both of my parents' families are very disparate. So I did not really grow up around my cousins, and this set happened to be my most removed. So I have not seen Katie since 1983 when she was teething. So I don't feel that we can say, oh, remember the last time we saw each other? I was a tween. I may not have, no, I wasn't even a tween. I was 10 and you were 1.
Yes. And I have zero recollection of this. So this is,
Yes, we can safely say this is our first meeting. And we are so thrilled to have you joining us, Katie, because even though Katie and I don't know each other, the beauty of social media means we are connected in ways we never could have been before.
Yeah.
And because I adore your mother, my Aunt Judy, the aunt who gave me the gift, as I've been telling everyone, I know a lot about you, Katie, and I happen to know that you and I are kindred spirits in many
I agree.
ways.
I agree. Yes, I know. The beauty of Facebook, as you said, has allowed us to kind of be like, I think we actually need to be in touch with each other.
Absolutely. Yes, we have many similar qualities. But we have Katie on today because Katie has her own business called Tribe Consulting. And Katie, tell us a little bit about that, because I think it'll help set the stage for what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so the work that I primarily do, it's kind of twofold. I started this work when I was exiting a CEO position of a chamber of commerce, where I had started doing a lot of work with business development and management training and talent development. About 3 years ago, I become a certified facilitator and coach through the Gallup organization to use the Clifton Strengths assessment tool. And so I began working with many of our members in working with their teams and coaching their executives. And as my season at the chamber came to an end and I thought, I really want to do this on my own, I transitioned out, took the big step to go out on my own and started Tribe Consulting. And so since then, I've done a lot of work, continued in that corporate space, working with CEOs, working with senior leadership teams, developing kind of culture curation programs for organizations that are looking to transform on the basis of the strengths of their talent. And then also a lot of one-on-one coaching work with women who are in a season of transition, whether that's personally or professionally. Maybe they're recreating their lives on some level, and just kind of that process of finding yourself again as you enter a new stage of life. So we've got the corporate side and then the more interpersonal, transformational coaching happening at the same time. So it's a fun journey for sure.
Absolutely. And such a, I think, great use of your what I perceive to be sort of intuitive and learned instincts.
Yeah.
So Katie, we're on today talking about the addiction of perfection, which I will be really honest, is not something I suffer with.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
I celebrate that with you.
Thank you. I have many of my own challenges, but this is not one of them, because I'm sort of a fan of, done is good enough. Let's move on. Which would explain why, for instance, when you said, oh, I found myself trying to be a perfectionist in school, blah, blah, blah. Not my journey at all. I was happy to take the B, sometimes the C. It was all good.
Yes,
But you have a very high intense personality that definitely lends itself to striving for perfection. So can you talk about both the strengths and the weaknesses of that? I mean, I'm such a believer that our greatest strengths are also our greatest weaknesses, and it's about 100%. Figuring out how to employ them in a positive way. So I don't want this to be a, boy, if you're a perfectionist, too bad for you, because I don't think that's true.
Right. No, and I completely agree with you. As I mentioned, the work that I do is I am a strengths coach. So my entire world revolves around exactly what you just said, of discovering what are people's concentrations of greatest talents and abilities, and how do we make them work more intentionally for us instead of almost being enslaved by our greatness. Because it does have a shadow side. Anything that we are blessed with, we also have to steward well, or it can become too much for us to manage efficiently, and it doesn't end up serving us. So in my case, using very specific language for the tool that I use, one of my top 5 strengths is the strength of competition, which means I constantly want to win everything. As a child, 7-year-old Katie with mom and dad, your aunt and uncle, game night ended in our home because of the fits I would throw if I didn't win the game. Because there was just from childhood this intensity, this desire to perform at my highest capacity, which equated to only one option of victory, regardless of the cost. And when it came to school, I remember my mom, I was homeschooled from kindergarten through my senior year of high school, by a mother who was committed to our success because, back in the 80s, people weren't homeschooling the way they
Right.
are now.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, it was kind of weird to be a homeschool family at that point. And so mom was like, ooh, man, I have every opportunity to mess up my children forever. So she wanted to do her absolute best to set us up academically for success. And I remember her telling me as a little kid, and she made it very clear. She's like, I don't care what your grade is, as long as you are doing your best. Well, the way I'm wired, I interpreted best to mean, well, best equals A, so A equals the only option. So from then on, I was on this course bound and determined to have perfect academic performance. I mean, I remember to this day, I got 1 C in my kindergarten through high school career. And I still will justify why I got it, because I wrote the things on the wrong line. I was spent, I think, probably the rest of the day grieving this C, because I had this overwhelming expectation that I had set on myself that anything other than perfect performance equated to failure. It wasn't about the growth. It wasn't about the process. It wasn't about, being on a path of development. It was performance needed to be at this certain level, or it was crushing to my soul. And that kind of followed me through my elementary, high school, college career, graduated from a tough university with highest honors, with 4.0, with the honors and highest honors, because it was this need for me to prove to myself and to be committed to the successful path that I was on. That it was just, I don't know why I was wired that way, but victory, success was just really important for my life, which in some ways that helped me position myself to be successful in a career. But it's all about managing and finding ways to expand beyond the myopic view of success can only equal this, and it's tied to my performance, and my worth is then tied to my success, and not be in this constant, what could be a very toxic and crippling pattern of needing to perform at a high level in order to feel like you have any worth.
Yeah, so that's, do you want to say something? What? Oh, sorry. That's what I was thinking as I was listening to you, is the tying of your internal monologue to yourself and the way that you perceive yourself in the mirror. If the only answer is 100,
yes,
then how have you overcome this? Let's just sort of cut past, because I think people have a general sense of struggle of perfection, but
yes,
how are you managing it? Because that quality doesn't just go away.
no. Well, I think it's about kind of almost picking your battles for me, deciding as I've calmed down with maturity and I've expanded my life beyond the academic world. Now I'm a mother, I was a wife, I have a family. Things are not just so easily focused in one area. But that same idea of needing to be the perfect mom or the perfect wife or the perfect whatever, perfect friend can start spilling and splashing over. And, I was in a relationship and married for over a decade to a person that demanded a certain level of performance from me. So it turned into a situation where there was this internal monologue of, I'm underperforming, I'm not doing enough, coupled with external validation of all of those points, down to you're not loading the dishwasher correctly, you're not cleaning the house well enough, you're giving the kids too much sugar, those types of things. So it was this battle of me struggling with, am I doing well enough? Like I said, coupled with this voice saying, you're not. So it was a long process of me kind of sorting through to discover the truth of the situation, of what is valuable about me, where am I actually doing well, do I believe that what I'm doing is right or good enough? And it took a decade to get to a place where I was able to start kind of discerning, this behavior is actually really bad for me. The internal narrative, in addition to this relationship that ended up being very harmful. And so, with a lot of external help, voices, a team of coaches, counselors kind of coming in and helping me expand this understanding of that type of behavior, internal and external, equals toxicity. Like it's not good for you, it's not healthy for you. And that language change really helped me begin to lower my unrealistic expectations of perfection. And the language change I'm referring to is, everything in my mind is very black and white, good or bad, perfect or not perfect. But they introduced the concept of healthy and unhealthy. And that changed so much of my perspective, because then it wasn't about trying to do right, good, perfect, and more running it through the filter of, is this healthy for me? Is this need to be perfect, to perform at this level, healthy for me? Is sitting and listening to this voice saying, you're not good enough, healthy for me? Is staying in a relationship that continues that type of cycle healthy or not? And that gave me a very different ability to perceive the decisions, the choices that I wanted to make, and allowed me to start freeing myself from that pressure of performance equals good, because performance sometimes doesn't equal healthy. And that really put me in a different mindset where it was like, okay, let's make the goal health instead of perfection. And by health, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's very different language, very subtle changes, but gosh, it can free people from that trap.
Have you ever thought of giving this a talk like this to juniors and seniors in college?
I haven't, but maybe we should talk about that.
Oh my God, I think they'll need it. I don't know if I'm doing this right. When Dana said you want to say something, I thought I'm afraid to. So I want to circle back.
Because it needs to be perfect.
No, well, that's the point. I've got students who are like, they're on the 4.0 path, and suddenly they get a B- in calculus 2.
Yeah.
And I just said, no, it's a badge of honor. Also, it'll be something to talk about in a job interview.
Yes.
Overcoming it.
Someone will bring up and go, oh my God, you got a B- in Calc 2. And they could say, yes, it was hard. Yeah. And I've learned.
It was hard and I tried.
Yeah. So I'm not even sure if that's the right advice to give them now, listening to this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting way to think of it. So if I think about in the household that I grew up in, there was almost no pressure put on my grades.
Yeah.
My parents were not math and science whizzes. And so if I was passing, I was doing fine. Yeah. And I decided that was not the approach I wanted to take as a parent. And so I was pretty hard on Quinn because I knew that Quinn had incredible acumen, and I felt like Quinn was a little bit lazy. And that made me insane, because that is probably something I suffer with, is that I want to just go at 1,000%, all the
Mhm.
time. And if it should be done next week, then it better be done today. And so his first year of college, I had flown out to drive home with him at the end of the year, and he was getting his grades as we were driving back. And this is a kid who was in math and physics classes at this point, none of which I took.
Yeah.
And he was panic stricken to tell me that he'd gotten a B in, like Calc 7000. I don't know, it was some calculation I've never heard of.
Yeah.
And I was overwhelmed with realizing that I had built into him thinking that that was simply not acceptable. And so we had a long conversation because it was a long car ride. And, I mean, one of the things that you discover when you become a parent is all the things you held on to that your parents maybe didn't do very well. You sort of have to give them a little bit of a pass.
Yep. Oh, for sure.
You are making mistakes you can't do better at as well.
Yep.
And you also realize you have to overcome even a good childhood. And that you're going to make different mistakes than they did because you are reacting and responding to what worked and didn't work for you and all those things. So it's its own kind of form of navigating through this journey in and of itself. But your point of giving them coping mechanisms to deal with a B minus.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't do that very well.
No.
We want everybody to win and to do the best that they can and to show up and feel like nothing is a failure. And actually in life, all kinds of things are failures, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, getting to that point where that's part of the process and an acceptable part is really hard, especially when you are either someone that's just very driven or someone that ties their value, their worth, their identity to their performance. I struggle in those same areas. Of this past year, I've opted to homeschool my kids with COVID and all the craziness that has occurred. It was easiest for us in our recent journey to just say, we're going to stay at home. We're going to do our own curriculum online instead of trying to do remote learning. And so here's me, healthier than I used to be, but still, I mean, I'm all about the game of the grades as well as the performance, right? Like for me, a test is like all right, let's see what we've got. I mean, I would memorize notebooks full of my professors' lectures so that they couldn't trick me because I would remember verbatim every word they said. So it became like this game for me. Well, I have two children, one of whom is an artist by nature, and academics are of little interest to my daughter. And so I'm raising a child who does not have any of the same motivation, interest, desire, competitiveness to perform that I did. And so to try to nurture her in that same in a healthier manner than my mentality would naturally bend to, which is A's are what we strive for, and moving into that conversation of what is good for her. How do we allow her to focus on how to learn instead of how to perform, to absorb information, to understand concepts versus to just, spit everything right back out, and allow her to feel successful on her journey towards whatever her life story is going to be, instead of feeling pressure from mama to be this academic performers, trained monkey, basically. Like we show up, we regurgitate information, because that's just not her. That's not her natural bent. And trying to, strike that balance, as you were saying, of helping them have work ethic and their own drive so that they can push for developing those muscles of grit and working for something, but not being as tied to the outcome.
Well, and also not defining their self-worth by someone else's definition, which is hard.
It's so hard.
I think we all, if I think about the ways that you talk about the insecurities that you had growing up, it's so out of whack. I hate that one. I'm looking back like this, and we got to get a system in place. Anyway.
Do you know any producers by any chance?
I'll look at my LinkedIn connections and
see
what we can find.
No, but when I think about the ways you used to you have reflected on feeling insecure, feeling like you didn't measure up, and all of those things, and so you veered towards alcohol because it gave you that veil
Yeah.
of fitting in.
It's kind of a numbness that got you through.
You know, and
Yeah.
so I think that we do so many people a disservice by asking them to perform or asking them to fit the mold or
Yes.
expecting them to be what we were because they're our children or
Mhm.
it's our marriage. And so it should look the way someone else's marriage looks or whatever it is. And
Mhm.
then, of course, Katie, you and I also have both the blessing and the burden of having grown up in a religious environment, which
Mhm.
lends itself to a whole other layer
Yeah.
of perfectionism and
Yeah.
judgment and,
Mhm.
you know, all of those things. I like to tell this story that I was at our grandparents' church when I was
Mhm.
pregnant. So I was 22, pregnant, and a woman whose daughter I had kind of grown up with in this little church sat down. I hadn't seen her in years, and she said to me, "Well, Dana, you're pregnant. How exciting!" And I said, "Okay, you know, I mean, I was not excited, but whatever." She said to me, "I want to meet your husband," and I said, "Oh, I don't have a husband."
Yeah.
She went, "Oh."
Mm.
She pushed her chair back and got up and walked away. And I thought, well, God
Goodness.
love you. What a Christian
Right.
you are.
What a bundle of love.
Yep, that's what Jesus would do for sure.
Yes.
But I say that because I know that
Mhm.
that has also been a piece of the challenge and the blessing. I mean,
Yeah.
even though I don't have anything to do with organized religion, you better believe that foundational support
Mhm.
in me, both positively and less than positively.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's
I
a struggle,
completely
I think.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's kind of the catchphrase I'm hearing a lot on social media of people who grew up in established religious organizations and households is the deconstruction, like the deconstruction of their faith, where
Yep.
we're not abandoning it, but we're kind of just taking it apart and going, what if this is actual truth? And what if this is complete nonsense based on control, manipulation, coercion, guilt? And I think that that has been part of that journey of the getting free and the getting healthy. You know, I've done a lot of that work with my counselors saying, for example, you know this, but for those who are watching, I decided to end my marriage after 13 years, which was a ridiculously hard decision for me to make because of that performance mentality of good versus bad, that there are two choices, the right one and the wrong one. And I was raised to believe that divorce was wrong, period. Did not matter the circumstances except for, the big problems like
Right.
adultery or physical abuse. But there is a whole myriad of other things that we don't like to talk about very publicly that can result in the healthiest choice being to end that relationship. And my devotion to my faith was a very big reason that I stayed much longer than I should have. I knew after a month that this wasn't good, that this wasn't healthy, but I couldn't at that point discern healthy versus good. Like it could be unhealthy, but still good somehow in my mind,
Well,
like
'cause you
right versus
made
wrong.
this vow, and so
Yes.
vow has significance that is perhaps given more weight than it deserves.
Absolutely, absolutely. And because of, again, the upbringing, it was divorce is just a bad thing. God doesn't approve of it. The church doesn't approve of it. And yeah, that there we're not talking about these things enough, I think, within most Christian circles or faith-based circles of that we have sacrificed a lot of just the opportunity to be a healthy, well-functioning, well-adjusted person, sacrificing that in the name of being a good Christian. So you have these people that are not okay, but they look like they're perfect. Their performance is put together, they're behaving in all the right ways, and they're dying on the inside. And that's often that price that's paid for living up to this standard of perfection.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
really remarkable.
It's kind
Go
of
ahead.
traps that people put into place. I mean, you mentioned about, some churches don't look well on divorce, but then why would they marry someone a second time?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yes, it won't destroy the sanctity of your second marriage, but shame on you anyway.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And religion does, the man-made constructs that we've put into place to define our faith and to build the buildings and to set the expectations of the members of our club
Mhm.
are really traps for people. It keeps us in a place of not being able to fully embrace our faith either, because God is now restricted, confined, defined,
Yeah.
and keeps people in a place of constantly questioning their own instincts, their desires, their own intellect, thinking I must sacrifice and ignore all of these things to be this perfect expectation that's been put out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not very biblical. I'm just going to go on record. I'm no biblical
It's
scholar,
not.
but I sure don't see any part of Jesus talking about that. So,
No, I agree. I
Yeah.
completely agree. And I think that's why we're seeing such a movement of people that are walking away from much of the standardized religious structures because it's not serving them well and it is so glaringly unhealthy. And people are desperate to be healthy in so many areas, and we can't live up to these standards anymore. But yeah, I was kind of in that perfect storm of my own academic performance, my own personality, my own desire to compete, to win, to perform, to do all the right things. And then in this environment of well-meaning but religious people that were confirming that, yes, you should kill yourself essentially to perform to this standard.
Yeah.
So, and I was susceptible to those types of ways of thinking. Some who are more independently minded, a little bit more naturally rebellious, may have been able to call that out well before I did. But being someone that wants to comply and perform well and be the good girl,
A good girl. Yep.
was extremely susceptible to a toxic relationship that enforced that, the religious structures that kind of shaped me in those mentalities. And yeah, it takes a while to start going, wait a second, I don't like this. I don't want to be this way anymore.
Yeah.
This isn't good for me.
Yeah. So what's next for you, Katie?
Good question. So with COVID, with this year of craziness that we have all lived through, and the fact that I've been homeschooling my kids, work has been slow to kind of restart. Everything came to a sudden halt about this time last year. And so I'm creeping back now into more work with corporate organizations. In fact, I'm here visiting mom and dad because I had a client who had me come in for a full day retreat, working with their team on introducing them to their strengths, working on positioning them individually to be successful within the organization, and working with them on creating fundamentals that really allow them to embody and live out the values of the organization in a tangible, practical way. So getting back into that work. And then I really have just fallen in love with this coaching piece of working with women, because I have been on such a personal journey of really overhauling my life and my way of thinking and my belief system for the past just about 2 years, professionally changing careers, going out on my own, leaving a marriage, being a single mom, all of this, that I thought, I know that there are other women who are in a position where they see the change is imminent and necessary, but it can be very, very scary to start deconstructing your life and rebuilding. And so I want to lean more heavily into that work because there is such a need.
Yeah. Well, I think there's
That's
no
interesting.
question that there is such a direct correlation between the struggles that you have been through and overcome and the struggles that you have been through and overcome. And to me, the interesting thing about these conversations is just the universality of the human experience.
Yeah.
The struggle might be unique to each of us, but
Yep.
but we all have this stuff that's hanging us up, that's keeping us back, that is trying to define us, whether it fits us or not.
Yep.
And when you are lucky, you get a second chance or a seventh chance, or you take your chance and you say, I will define who I am and where I'm going. And I will sort of take that leap into the great unknown, because the great unknown is better than this.
Yes, I know the known, and it's not so great.
Yeah, I don't care for the known. I don't care for that. So I'm going to try something different. And I just have so much admiration, Katie, for the journey you've been on and for how public you have been about it, because I know that that has not come without criticism. It has not come without personal cost. And I just want you to know, as an outsider who barely knows you, but feels a kinship to you, you are seen and your work really matters. And I know it's making a
I
difference
would
for people.
completely agree with all of that. So keep going.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, and the same for you guys. I know it takes courage to talk about your journey publicly, but I think vulnerability is just so healing. You know, when people see someone that's willing to be vulnerable, and it just opens something up, and people listening to it going, well, maybe I can be too, and maybe I can seek help, seek healing, begin my own journey of restoration. So I admire you all very much as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And could we please not wait 37 more years?
Yes, I will happily
Meet you
do
in
that.
person
Yes,
at
I
some
think we
point.
need an updated picture where I'm not sitting on your lap, maybe next to you this time. That'd be good.
Yes, I think so too. And I will try to recover my nose. Holy buckets, the light came
there
through
it
this
is.
window. Yeah, I guess if I
Oh,
saw
I know. I haven't
I
seen
do
you
have one.
sometimes too,
Yeah.
where I'm like, apparently I'm a ghost now,
Yeah.
but you look beautiful anyway.
Yeah, you've been
Thank you.
fantastic. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much for your time and sharing with us. And please greet your fabulous parents.
I
me
will.
and,
I think they're watching live now.
Oh,
so-
yay! Hi, Auntie and Uncle. We will.
Mom and Dad
see
said,
you,
help
I
us pull
hope,
up
very
Facebook
soon.
so we can watch. Yes, I hope we do that.
That's a step in the 21st century. Well done.
Well done. I know. Magical things are happening here today.
We will talk to you soon. Soon.
Sounds great.
Take care.
Thanks.
Have a
Okay.
great
Bye,
day.
guys.
Everybody else, have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh my gosh, except for the fact that I could not stop fixating on the fact
You did
that my
very well.
nose is so
You did well, girl.
transparent.
You look so cute.